Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Porter. I'm with Be a Part of the Conversation. Judy Hirsch is also on, and she is also with Be a Part of the Conversation. We present programs like this throughout the year in a roughly 5-county region. And tonight we're really happy to talk with you about alcohol, especially alcohol use among under 18-year-olds. Thank you so much to Montgomery County Office of Drug and Alcohol. They are a longtime partner of ours, and we're very grateful for their ongoing support. I'm glad to be talking with you all tonight. If you're in Montgomery County or not, doesn't matter. This will be relevant for everybody. You're welcome to submit questions that you have at any time. You can use the chat. You can use the Q&A box, and we are recording this, but those questions will not show up on the recording. So we'll see them as but everybody here who's a panelist, who you'll be hearing from momentarily, will be able to see your questions, but they won't be recorded. So you don't have to worry about that. And there is going to be, oh gosh, I didn't update this. I'm so sorry. It shouldn't be /technology. This would be /alcohol. So it's conversation.zone is our website. Conversation.zone/alcohol is where you will find the recording for this. Judy, I'm sure, will share the link in the chat for you. And it'll also be on the follow-up email that you'll get tomorrow. Please take a survey that will pop up. You'll be prompted at the end when the program ends. There will be something that says open this link to take a survey. We really love to hear your feedback. It helps us to know if this was helpful or not, which kinds of topics you might like in the future. And it really, really does mean a lot to us for you to take the time to do that. So thank you in advance. There's the page, conversation.zone/alcohol. There we go. All right, just a couple of programs I want to tell you about that are coming up. We are talking about alcohol again on Tuesday. And by the way, we have loads of other things we discuss. You can find those all on our website, but we're really focusing on this because, you know, alcohol, as you're going to see in a little bit, we're going to talk about the fact that it is ubiquitous. It is often seen as not only acceptable, but glorified and encouraged and all this sort of thing. And we want to really focus on this coming Tuesday night on women and alcohol. So we'll be looking at that with another terrific panel. I hope you'll join us for that. And also in the beginning of June, we're going to have a program that helps people to navigate housing for recovery, because this is a huge challenge to understand all the different levels of structure, of restrictions, who takes medically assisted treatment, folks, who doesn't, you know, cost, all that sort of thing. So we're going to be unpacking all of that on June 2nd. But there's a lot more that you can learn about some upcoming programs on our calendar, and Judy will probably share that link as well. One more thing I'm going to tell you about is parent partnership. These are support group meetings that take place all year long. You can see this calendar on this page that has all these meetings listed, and these are all little buttons on this calendar. That the green ones show Zoom meetings and the purple ones are in person, and you can click on those and you'll get information about where or when and all the details about those meetings. Sometimes we list the topics that are coming up and so on. But I'm the parent of somebody in recovery, as is Judy. And, you know, I sure need the connection of other family members who are going through what I've been through with my son's addiction and subsequent recovery. So I really encourage you, if you are impacted as a parent, guardian, any kind of caregiver, for these meetings. There's also Al-Anon and Nar-Anon meetings for other family members as well, and including parents. In just a moment, you will be meeting our panelists, who are just terrific. I can't wait for you to hear from them, but I will reintroduce them at the end. I just want to let you know that they are here on our panel, and we're very, very grateful that they're with us. Okay, so alcohol has been with us. You know, I like to say that since berries fell off trees and fermented, there's been alcoholism, because, you know, if we want to find a way to feel better, we'll find it, right? So this is some advertising just through the years that have really helped to normalize alcohol use. And, you know, imagine, especially, you're going to hear from somebody tonight who is in recovery from alcohol use. Walking into the grocery store in the early days of sobriety, what is it like when you are just bombarded everywhere you go now? Here in Pennsylvania, of course, we have Alcohol is available in grocery stores and just about everywhere. So it's really all throughout our culture, our community. It is our cultural drug of choice. And I just grabbed some images on Etsy. This just is more of the, glorifying and making it fun and harmless. And, it's like decor, it's wardrobe, it's all sorts of things. And a lot of very very flippant, frankly, attitudes about it. And, alcohol can do a lot of harm, and it's killing more people annually than even heroin and opioids, just because it is it's a slower progression perhaps, and it's not as immediately fatal, but it certainly creates a lot of problems. I mean, this one especially, this just blew my mind when I found this. Wine pairings for Girl Scout cookies. What's the message that we're sending? So there have been a lot of studies done that ask young people about what their who influences them, what influences them. And this is a meta-analysis of 5 different studies. And you can see that universally it reflects how important parents' attitudes are. So whether you decide to drink or not to drink has a lot to do with the influence of your parents. It can be seen in a lot of different ways, I think. But we do know that educating parents is really important. So if you are a parent, thank you for being here, and you are doing such a great service to your children, because the more you learn about substance use, the less likely they are to have challenges with substance use. And, if we're over 21 and we're able to drink in moderation, there's absolutely no judgment there. But what kind of messaging are we using when we're pouring the drink, when we're grabbing a beer, when the friends come over, the first thing when they walk in the door, what are you drinking? What are you drinking? So our kids hear that. And we know that kids model parent behavior. So we just want to hopefully encourage some mindfulness about this, about the way that we're presenting it as an important part of life or not. Let's not give it the importance that we maybe historically have in this country. COVID has, what hasn't COVID impacted, right? But it certainly has impacted alcohol use. And I grabbed some images from social media about the way people love to normalize this, love to validate, love to say like, oh, look, this is a joke. Everybody's doing it. The quarantini, right? All that sort of thing. It's again, the modeling of adults that kids are seeing, that kids want to be like adults. And, this could be making things a little bit harder for our kids to make good, healthy choices for themselves. And again, post-COVID, looking at alcohol use, we've seen an increase since the onset. I mean, this could be contributed by a lot of things, including isolation, including feelings of depression or anxiety. In some cases, it could be wanting to feel like you're still social. In other cases, it could be feeling very depressed that you're not social. So who knows what all the contributing factors are, but particularly this section down here in gray is all looking at women's use. And that's why we're going to talk specifically about that on Tuesday. But back to adolescence, particularly, this is just a study that looked at when people under the age of 18 drank for the first time. And you can see we're coming up on a peak time for the introduction of alcohol in a young person's life. So very important to talk about this time of the year, and the holidays obviously are another time. This could be access, it could be just free time with friends, that sort of thing. Times of transition can be a risk for young people, just because there's some built-in anxieties that come with that, going from middle school to high school to next steps and things like that. Just to be mindful of, again, some of these risk factors. And I like to sort of take a look at some things that we hear pretty consistently throughout the years about parents' perspectives on alcohol. So here's one that we hear a lot. We have an agreement with our kids that if they drink, they know that they can call us and they don't have to ask any questions. And I would like to challenge that a little bit. What is the message that we're sending? Like, I'll be your designated driver. And why wouldn't we ask questions about the fact that they were drinking underage? We don't want to drive them underground so that they do it without talking with us about it. We want to foster communication, which I'll be getting to in just a moment, but we really also want to make sure that they're really clear that it's not okay for you to drink underage. It's just not legal. You're definitely going to be hearing more about that from a friend from the district attorney's office who is with us this evening. I hear this quite a bit too. Well, in Europe and other countries, this is sort of that, oh, it's the forbidden fruit mentality, right? So if you could have it when you were a kid, you wouldn't go binge drinking and drinking on the sly. So the problem is in Europe, there is a great deal of alcoholism. This is certainly not preventative. In fact, they have higher rates of binge drinking in many European countries, teenagers included, especially teenagers, in fact. So fortunately, this is a false narrative. I hear this probably most often. Well, if they're going to drink, I'd rather they do it at home. Sometimes you hear, oh, we'll take their keys so that they don't drive. Again, we're condoning. We're saying it's okay when we do that. Like taking the keys, by the way, kids are pretty savvy. If they're going to someone's house where they know they're going to be taking keys, they bring the keys to the Volkswagen you haven't had for 20 years. So please don't think that this is a protective factor either. The reality is the message they're hearing is my parents don't mind if I drink, and B, I need to drink to have a good time socially. Like it's that important that I'm going to have alcohol, even though it's not legal yet. There aren't any other laws, hopefully, that these families are breaking. So let's not break this law. We just got the 2021 survey, Pennsylvania Youth Survey results, but unfortunately, I don't have all the data yet to give you together. But just taking a look at the survey that was done right before that, this is something that's conducted every other year. So this is from the 29 results. So you can see that where kids are getting alcohol, parents and friends' parents are frequently used. And then you can see that it went up actually from 2017 to 2019. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to hear about 2021, but again, that's out there available. And it's actually the link to it is on that follow-up page. So you'll find the 2021 survey results. Oh gosh, I need my reading glasses for this one. Okay. And by the way, this PowerPoint is also going to be on the follow-up page. So this says kids who took without permission. So this is looking at 8th, 10th, and 12th grade. Kids who took the alcohol without permission, gave money to someone to buy. This is the waiting outside the liquor store and asking someone to buy it for you. And then this is someone over 21 providing it. And this is just buying it in a store. So obviously this assumption is that they were able to get away with a false ID or something like that, or weren't ID'd. And again, this is Montgomery County pays. So 10th and 12th grade students, binge drinking is going down, thankfully. So the messaging to kids that binge drinking and driving, these uses are going down, which is really good news. This was drank alcohol in the past 30 days. This was binge drinking over the past 2 weeks. And this was drinking after alcohol use, so drinking repeatedly. So if you're a parent, caregiver, guardian, just don't supply it. It's just not something that we want to be responsible for providing to young people. Again, you'll hear more from Kelly Lloyd about that. Be at home when they're having parties. Check things like the window wells in the basement. They like to pass things through that. You can check backpacks and things like that. So just making sure, you know what, you are their parent, not their friend. So it's okay for them to not be happy with you or embarrassed by you. That is our job, to embarrass our children sometimes. But we don't want to, be in a position of finding out that there's been alcohol served in our home. So again, I'll let Kelly talk more about this, but just a little bit more. I want to tell you about parenting skills that we need. And the big one is communication skills. So if your child should walk in under the influence, we're very upset when that happens. So I can tell you that my son, the first thing I was aware of with him was cannabis use. It wasn't alcohol, it was cannabis use, but he was high. I panicked. I sat him down for a good old lecture. Guess how effective that was, right? But I reacted. I was very, very reactive. I just wanted to shut it down as fast as I could. I was afraid. It scared me. I didn't know what to do with this information. And so I just went right into lecture mode. Not effective at all. I basically just helped to push him further underground so he'd be a lot more careful the next time he walked in the door. So I was not ready to have that conversation. And to be ready to listen means, okay, now that I do want to have a conversation with you, presumably they're not under the influence. So now we're ready to sit down. But maybe just to start by saying, please help me to understand how you believe drinking is helping you, or why you feel it's okay for you to drink, and then to just be thoughtful about listening and just hearing them and not reactive, and to even think about our body language and regulating our anxiety. So, I would probably have looked very freaked out when I was having these conversations with my son. That was projecting, I can't hear this. I'm freaking out. This isn't good for me. And that, again, is not conducive to the conversation. So just being open, listening, taking it in, knowing that we're going to maybe talk about it some more when I've had some time to digest this and to get on the same page as the other parent. So that is really key here. Even if two parents are not agreed, are not on the same page behind the scenes, at least come together about what can we agree on? Can we agree that we're not going to condone this? Can we agree to these consequences? Or can we agree that they need to see someone professionally because this keeps happening? And that consistency is really, really important also. As I said just a little while ago, we're their parent. They have so many opportunities to make friends. We don't need to be their friends. We need to be their parents. We often share the way the adolescent brain develops. None of our brains are fully developed until we're 25 years old. So that prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that is responsible for executive function, making important decisions, thinking through like this might be a bad idea, that is not fully there until they are roughly 25 years old. So we like to say parents are kind of the frontal lobe. We're there to say that was a bad idea. And here's what we're going to help you with so that you don't feel you need to keep on drinking. Making a connection outside of these sometimes very challenging conversations. Let's not have every conversation be heavy and intense and about what we're worried about. Let's have conversations about what do you want us to do this weekend? What would be fun to do? Or can you tell me about that teacher that you really liked, or whatever? We need to make sure that we're building really strong connections with our kids that aren't related to these heavier subjects. And please take time to put these things away, like at the dinner table, to find time to really just eye to eye, family member to family member conversation is so very important. And when our kids make mistakes, it's like I like to say, trust your kids to be kids. We all did it. We were all there. We all made some really bad choices. Didn't have the frontal lobe yet. We were really very eager to try new things or take some risks. So we made mistakes. So encouraging them to talk about those mistakes and not freak out about it, but also to talk about and acknowledge, well, I love that you made some apologies to your friend. That was really responsible of you and really thoughtful, to not only notice the bad decisions, but all the great decisions as well. They're not bad decisions, they're wrong decisions, but there are also some great ones. And this is everything to do with being a snowplow parent, right? Helicopter parents we all hear about are the ones who are hovering and overly involved and checking the grades and that kind of thing. But snowplow parents, and I think I can definitely own up to this, we don't want to see our kids in pain. And so we tend to try to make the things that hurt them go away by smoothing it out, taking away the challenges, and they were robbing them of this opportunity to grow. Who among us has had any kind of growth in their life without challenges? So it hurts us to see that, as a friend of mine says, we need to get comfortable with seeing our kids be uncomfortable, because that is part of life. And we want to see them learn how to navigate these things on their own. And take opportunities when there is a family gathering and if you see a lot of substance use, to maybe have a conversation afterward with your child, just to say, what did you think about that? Did you notice anyone's behavior changing as the drinking was happening? Because they're noticing it. They are absolutely, even at young ages, they're noticing it. And if they're family and there's a problem with alcohol use, this could be a genetic thing that we need to discuss. That is one of the great risk factors for alcohol use disorders and other substance use disorders, of course, is genetics. And finally, I just wanted to say, role playing, if they're not comfortable role playing with you as a parent, if they have a friend who they are often going to parties with or socializing with, but they really trust this friend and they're starting to notice that everybody, and it's not everybody, but they believe that everybody is drinking, let's talk about what you'll say if you don't want to drink, so that they have that opportunity to, kind of get those pathways going. Like, this is what I'm going to do if I'm asked to drink and I don't want to. And if they want to even do this, as I said, with a friend that they trust and feel safe with, to kind of work through a plan on leaving a party, refusing the alcohol or other drugs, that sort of thing. We really encourage this, just because that way they're not caught off guard and not really having a plan for how to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to get back here to my slide because I didn't put it at the end. Here we go. To tell you who's with us. Okay, we're going to be starting with Heather. So I'm going to stop sharing now so that you can absolutely see her. Wait a minute, why can't I stop sharing? Here we go. Okay. All right, Heather, you want to unmute? And Heather is with us as our person in recovery, and for which we are deeply, deeply grateful. So thank you so much, Heather, for being here.
Of course, Kim. I love to be here. I love to do this for you. And I think I just realized that I'm a snowplow parent. So I'm going to work on that. My name's Heather, and I'm a person in recovery. I'm an alcoholic. I am also a drug addict, but I identify as an alcoholic. And I've been sober for almost 4 years now. I'm in my 30s, so I got sober when I was 27 or 28, maybe. So many of the things that Kim just talked about, I experienced in my childhood and teenage years. I pretty much grew up in like a very well-to-do family in Montgomery County. And my whole life, my parents both were also snowplow parents, and made sure I never had to go through any struggles, whatever it was. They fixed it, and whether it be like throwing money at it or making the problem go away. I was like totally emotionally stunted for still probably, but a really long time in my life. I guess my parents divorced when I was around 11 or 12. And funny enough, I started drinking, or had my first drink, when I was 13, I think 12 or 13, around that same time. So, after my first drink, I had like many drinks with my family. Like, I tried my dad's beer probably from like the age of like 5. And in hindsight, I would never allow my 5-year-old to do that. But my first like real drunk was in 7th grade. And me and a bunch of girlfriends raided my friends' parents' liquor cabinets, just like you said. Judy stole it from someone else. And we had no idea what we were doing. We just knew that the adults were doing it. They looked like they were having fun, so we were going to do it. And I got so drunk that night that I like literally flooded this girl's bathroom with puke, and ended up with alcohol poisoning. And I lied to my dad and told him that I had the flu. I remember he picked me up and like took me to bed and like got me soup and stuff. And I was really just like really, really drunk and hungover. And I was able to lie to my my parents would say I had the flu. And it wasn't long after that that I picked up my first like joint of weed. And so let's say like I was like 13 or 14 at this point, and I'm like on the weekends, like finding somewhere to have a beer. I would always try to hang out with the older kids because I knew that they had alcohol or weed. And by the time I was in high school, I was just like a full-blown party girl on the weekends and after school. But in school, I was still a good student. I played varsity sports. I was the captain of my sports teams. I was on the student council. There was nothing that would say like, this is a problem. But I mean, like nothing, blatantly, but really the problem is that I was drinking on the weekends. I was smoking weed before school, smoking weed after school. I actually remember in high school one time drinking before school. Now being a parent, I like think about that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine. I would lose my mind if I found out my child was doing that. And underage drinking had a lot of consequences for me. 2 weeks after my 15th birthday, I went out at night again, lied to my mom, said I was going to a sleepover with a friend. And instead, me and another friend went out pretty much just like looking for mischief. And we were walking around the neighborhood, saw some people drinking, and started drinking with them. And turns out one of those people was a 40-year-old man, and he was the one supplying the alcohol. And I was roofied that night and molested by this man. And I had just turned 16, and what was I doing out? I mean, not to victim blame myself because I don't, but I should have never been doing that. And I wouldn't have been doing that had I not started drinking and smoking and feeling like it was okay to do these things when I was younger. And it just kind of, and then like things really took off for me there. My parents took me to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist started prescribing me all these medications. I was already on like ADD medications from like elementary school, I think, like 5th grade, maybe. And you guys may or may not know this, but that changes the chemistry in your brain. And that's really not super healthy for someone of that age. And I wish my family had known better and done some other type of interventions. But pretty much by the time I was like 16 or 17, I knew how to manipulate my doctor, my psychiatrist, and to give me more medication. I was getting Xanax and Adderall and Ambien, and like we're talking about a child. And yeah, it's just like my life just really kind of started spinning out of control. And I mean, I drank every weekend, and I also remember in high school, like driving home from parties, like 20 minutes away, like blacked out drunk, like car full of people. And, I get home and I have no idea, like the next morning how we got home. And I realized I drove. And it's like so scary to think about. I remember another time my brother and I, who's 1 year older, went to a party. It was on like a Thursday, but we didn't have school the next day. And it was so far away, but my brother was so drunk, and I was pretty drunk too, but like the cops came, so we had to get in the car and drive home. So my brother's driving on 95 at like 7:00 in the morning, because we were there all night. So we were in rush hour traffic on 95, and he just started puking all over the place while he's driving. And I remember like he stopped the car, and like he got out on 95 and is throwing up, and he's a 17-year-old, I'm 16. And we get home, and my parents don't even ask a question. I mean, they probably knew what we were doing, but they don't want to hear it, So then, I mean, this is another one to mention. Kim mentioned this about the parents taking keys and stuff. For both my junior and my senior prom, the junior prom, I convinced my dad to let us have an after party at his house. He we tried to like make an agreement, like, you're not going to buy us beer, but we're going to get it. And you can take everyone's keys and we'll stay in the basement and it'll be safe. And that is like what happened. But yeah, I mean, it really does. It sends a message that like, it's okay to drink as long as, you know, you're at home. But either way, like, it made me continue to do it outside of the house. And then same with the senior prom at my mom's. My parents were divorced, so I was able to manipulate both sides. And when my mom's got really messy and people were doing cocaine upstairs, and we were smoking weed in the basement, and they were playing beer pong on the main floor. And yeah, I mean, like, we were children. I was 17 at the time. And then like down the line, things just got progressively worse for me. Like I went to college, continued to drink. And then while I was drunk in college, jumped a fence running from the cops and was prescribed pain medication. And from that moment on, I had an addiction to pain medication, to opioids, to Percocet, which led me down a horrible path of crippling opioid addiction, like homelessness, prostitution, and I ended up being a heroin addict. I was like one of those junkies you see on the street. You know, like, I ruined my whole life. My parents wouldn't talk to me. I lost everything, even my teeth, which are fake. But I mean, that's like the core of it. Like what, like the little things that happened in my childhood and adolescent, the messages that were sent, like, took me down a path of absolute destruction where I ruined my life. And I'm really lucky to be in recovery now. I now have a daughter. And I wasn't doing heroin when I had my daughter. I was lucky to be able to stop at that point and see a doctor and get help. But one thing that did happen, which really makes things come full circle, I was having such a hard time being a mom the first year of her life. I would start having a drink after she went to bed. And like, I can't even say, like, within a few weeks, probably, that addiction like kicked right into my brain. And I started having a drink like right before she goes to bed, and then maybe a half hour earlier, and then right before bath time, which is super dangerous. And then, I mean, the next thing I knew, I was putting Kahlua in my coffee in the morning. And I knew I needed help. And a little bit after my daughter's first birthday, my family had an intervention. And I got help. But yeah, I mean, I have a really great life now, but still, it's really important to, and I'm remembering this now, not be a snowplow parent and not enable your kids, and, you know, have open and honest conversations. And I think that's all I've got. Kim, do you want me to mention anything else?
Oh, God, Heather, you know, I've heard you speak before. I've got such a lump in my throat right now. I'm just grateful to you. And this is the power of this disease. You know, I know what a good person you are, and I know what this does to people like my son and you, and lots and lots and lots and lots of people who are so valuable and precious. And you articulated that path so beautifully, and I'm just so grateful that you are in recovery today and that you're with us, and that you are so giving with your story. So thank you very, very much, Heather.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Wow. All right, Kelly Lloyd, Jake to unmute.
That is a tough act to follow.
Isn't it? I know. Thank you.
But Heather, yes, thank you for sharing your story. And there, as you said, and there were things that you talked about along the way that I was thinking about, the legal issues that you encountered and could have encountered, and things that could have made things much worse. And I'm glad whenever the decisions were made to get behind the wheel, nobody was injured, nobody was hurt, and that things ended up the way that they did, and you have the successful life that you have now, and that you're able to be there for your daughter. And so I'm glad that you have that happy ending. So I just want to talk for a few minutes about some of the consequences that are out there, that are real whenever underage drinking is involved, and then some of the consequences that come into play for parents and adults who think that they might be doing a good thing but really are not. So the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about sexual assaults, and Heather actually talked about that a little bit in her stories. That is one of the biggest concerns about when alcohol consumption is involved. The studies show, and even with underreporting, the rates of sexual assaults occurring are just exponentially increased. You've got lowered inhibitions, judgments are clouded, and it just increases the chances of those boundaries getting blurred and people being able to fully consent or not fully consent. And those lines get blurred and things become a more dangerous situation for everyone involved, both victims and perpetrators. So that's another big reason, especially when you've got young individuals involved, why alcohol and mixing that is just a bad scenario. And then the other big area where we see a lot of problems come in that can be life-changing are when people get behind the wheel. When you've got younger individuals who don't appreciate the consequences, think they're invincible, think nothing bad could happen to them. I can tell you from experience that homicide by vehicle cases and aggravated assault by vehicle cases are the saddest cases that come across our desk at the district attorney's office, because usually it just involves some good people on both ends and some really bad decisions that happened one night that have life-altering consequences for both of those families that are involved. And they are so sad to watch a family who has somebody that they really care about that they have lost, and then a family who has somebody that they really care about that caused so much pain and hurt to another family because of those bad decisions that were made one night in impulsive actions. So those are the two biggest areas that I would say we see the most significant impact that alcohol can have, that have the harshest consequences. There are several offenses out there for minors that they can have legal consequences: paying fines, having to do community service, being arrested, having to spend some time, being locked up, just things that you don't want your kids to be involved in. We've got underage drinking, there's public drunkenness, disorderly conduct, getting a fake ID, possessing a fake ID, providing fake IDs for other individuals. You can end up getting a criminal record if you engage in these type of behaviors at a young age. And that's just not something that we want to see kids dealing with. And so, as Kim emphasized and Heather emphasized, communication is the key. You need to have these conversations with your kids so that they can appreciate what can happen and what they could be looking at if they choose to go down this pathway and engage in these behaviors. And then you've got the offenses for parents. So just having a party. So Heather talked about her dad having the party, taking the keys, that they would get the alcohol and it was no big deal. There wouldn't be any problems. Kids will stay there. Aside from the messaging that sends to the kids, that does not absolve you from legal consequences. The definition of furnishing also includes allowing individuals to consume alcohol on your property. So just because you don't buy it, just because you don't provide it, and the kids bring it themselves, that does not mean that you're absolved from all responsibility and you can just throw your hands up and say, well, I didn't give it to them. I had nothing to do with it. You having knowledge and allowing that to happen at your house is problematic, and you can have legal consequences for that. There are significant fines related, and there's jail time that you could face for that. Further, if somebody comes to your house and engages in a drinking party like that you're aware of, then gets behind the wheel, leaves and crashes and kills somebody or severely hurts somebody, you can be held responsible for that. So those are real consequences that people experience and that people don't think about, that parents think, well, I think it'll be safer if I just have them at my house and I just take everybody's keys and I can keep an eye on them. You can't control what those kids do once they start drinking. And it's just not something that you want to engage in, because that can be life-altering consequences for you. So those are the main points that I wanted to talk about and hit on, because I think there is a misunderstanding in particular about the hosting the party and thinking that it's no big deal. That is not true. So I don't want people to engage in that behavior and think that they can throw their hands up and say, no big deal. It's okay. They were safest here with me. So, but that's really all that I have to touch on, unless, Kim, you want me to talk about anything else, or unless there are any questions.
Kelly, no, I think that's good for now, but thank you. Yeah, if anything comes up for questions for Kelly, please put those in the chat. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Stacy Wisniewski, would you like to unmute? And is that, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I am going to share my screen and continue the conversation. So I work in prevention, primarily with middle and upper school students from an organization, Prevention Education Solutions. I'm also someone in long-term healthy recovery as well. That's how I got into prevention. And so I just wanted to talk through a little bit more about what Kim started with. What some of the myths around alcohol are, and what the research actually shows, and what you can do as parents. So alcohol, most common substance used by teens and young adults. Very often when I'm talking to adults, teens, and I work worldwide, multiple countries, even Europe, where the drinking ages are different, very often there is this misconception that alcohol isn't even a drug. So one of the first things that can be really helpful when talking to young people is very clearly defining this is a drug. Very often what goes into that is how we use this particular drug in social settings, how it's advertised, exactly like what Kim shared earlier. And more than 90% of alcoholic drinks, pretty interesting piece there, consumed by young people are consumed through binge drinking. So the teenage brain is significantly different than the adult brain. Very often when I meet with adults, they're saying, well, I just don't understand. I'll just teach my kids how to drink. I'll teach them how to respect alcohol. If I can do it as an adult, I don't understand why my 16-year-old can't do that. And the fact is the 16-year-old brain literally cannot do that. It does not know how to limit, especially when it comes to alcohol and other drug use. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, where that comes from. But that concept is something that I hear from parents worldwide. This idea of, I can just teach them how to drink. I can teach them how to respect alcohol. This is absolutely not true. It's been proven by over 20 years of research at this point, over and over and over. And I appreciate that Kim included information too about alcohol use rates among adults. So other data that we look at very often is significantly showing that when alcohol is more socially available, when it's expected in situations when the drinking age is lower, there are significantly higher rates of use. Because again, the teenage brain does not work the same way with alcohol and other drugs that it does in learning other skills. And so where some of this idea can come from is, we know very, very well at this point that you teach a child how to play guitar, or you teach them a foreign language, and the younger they are, the more capable they are of learning. They are incredibly capable of learning. But when you put a chemical in the brain, it doesn't work quite the same way. Other myths that we also have around this, either alcohol isn't a drug or it's not as bad as other drugs. Another key piece of the teenage brain is that the teenage brain does not do well with gray area at all, does not do well with nuance. And so partially what we saw in the last couple of years with the vaping products, that they were marketed as healthier alternatives. If you say to a teenager, here's this thing, we know tobacco use, very, very harmful. We've done a fantastic job of educating young people in this country. But then you take this other piece and you say, well, it's not as bad. It's healthier than that thing. Teens are going to assume that means it's healthy for me. And we see that same dynamic playing out when it comes to alcohol. I was just meeting last week with some middle school students, and I have them really engage in discussions about, so which one is worse for someone your age? And they have a lot of reasons behind all their perceptions, but really when it comes down to it, none of these things belong in the teenage brain. And you as an adult, as a parent, can simply say that. You don't have to have all the science behind it. You don't have to have all the facts, the statistics. But I just really want to reinforce what Kim said, that one of the most important things you can do as a parent is just engage in those conversations, saying this is not appropriate or healthy in your brain right now. And this third point, what has been kind of a continuing theme I'm seeing tonight, is kids who drink at home with adults, they'll get used to it, they'll drink less. If you take away your car keys, you're going to protect them. That's not true. If you take away their car keys, their car is safe, but their brains are not going to be safe. They are still exposed to all of those damages. And one key piece I do want to focus on as well to start with is a concept that I hear worldwide. All teenagers drink. It's just what they do. It's a rite of passage, the theme of tonight. And I hear this no matter what country I'm in, whatever the drinking age is, drinking becomes something that young people equate with, I'm an adult, therefore I can now use this substance. And that creates that expectation. We've also done a lot of research in the public health community on something called the social norms approach. So that's that idea that was touched on throughout tonight, that everyone's doing it. And in conversations especially in the 80s and 90s, we really talked a lot about peer pressure. We had the advertisements for it. But peer pressure, a lot of it exists within a person. So as human beings, we are social creatures. We struggle to fit in, we struggle to belong, and that's totally normal. That's totally acceptable. However, when I have a misconception about what everyone is doing, when I think everyone as a teenager drinks, this is just what everyone does, it's what I see on TV shows, on movies, on Snapchat, on TikTok. It's what I hear my parents talking about. I put pressure on myself, and I'm more likely to engage in that behavior. So a really helpful prevention strategy is to listen to what your child is saying. And if you hear the term everyone, just simply asking them, is it everyone? How do you know that's everyone? Let's talk about that. And the conversation doesn't have to be about alcohol and other drugs. It can be about anything else, like everyone in this county or everyone in this city. I have seen students completely flip their mindset just by simply having a conversation about, well, what do you mean by everyone? Tell me more about that. I will often work in a community where I'll go to a public school and then I'll go to a private school. And when I go to the public school, they're telling me it's all the private school kids that are drinking, doing all the drugs. That's what they're doing over there. I go to the private school, they're like, it's the public school kids. And we can't see what's actually going on there. So helpful prevention strategy, again, is examining your own perception as a healthy adult. Especially if you're someone who works in a helping profession, if you work in law enforcement, if you work as a teacher, a faculty member, a counselor, you are more likely to focus on those students who are in trouble. Your vision is going to be very much focused on those individuals rather than getting the wider view. The fact that over the last several years, particularly since 2010, we've seen a significant decrease in alcohol use among young people. It is actually becoming the norm to not use alcohol and other drugs, specifically when we look at binge drinking. This data is from before the pandemic, but this continued during the pandemic. What we are starting to see, especially among young people, is lower rates of use of alcohol and marijuana, even as a whole, from Monitoring the Future is where all this data is coming from. Yes, there are areas, especially where marijuana is being legalized, where we'll see older adult or young adult use focused on like individuals in their early 20s, some of that 12th grade level use. But the general trend is that not everyone is doing it. And that's a really important message we do need to continue sharing with young people. We've seen a lot of advertisements. I've seen a lot of those scary news stories throughout the pandemic of what's wrong with our kids. They're all stressed out. Adults are drinking more. Alcohol overdoses are soaring. And understandably, we're concerned, especially as adults who care for children. But we want to really take it a step back, think about what is actually going on here so that we can approach that conversation calmly, having that calmer conversation. So alcohol use did continue to be about even, continuing that steady decline throughout the pandemic. However, one key difference we did see is higher levels of teens reporting use at home. And that can be from a variety of reasons. I have talked to parents myself about this, some parents saying, well, I felt like they were missing out on stuff. I wanted to give them that experience, or maybe they were just bored and I wanted them to be prepared for college. So that idea of I want to prepare them, I want to teach them how to drink. For whatever the reason, adults serving students alcohol or young people alcohol has increased. And that has been shown by research to lead to higher rates of binge drinking outside the home. How we can really see this is if I were to serve my child alcohol, they're probably only going to drink exactly what I'm going to serve them, especially if I'm watching them. But they take the message when they go out with their friends of, my mom says it's okay, I can do this. And their brain has already gotten a taste of that dopamine rush, the feeling from alcohol. They're less likely to limit how much they're using when they're with their friends. Another key piece that we're also seeing reflected in this data is the perception of risk decreasing around alcohol and particularly marijuana as well. When perception of risk decreases, when I think of something as it's not that bad, or like, it's not so harmful, use does tend to increase. And with that use increasing, we've already heard tonight some of those effects of alcohol in the teenage brain, but more specifically, the physical impacts can impact the development of the hippocampus, the memory centers of the brain, makes it difficult for students to retain information, could lead to long-term memory damage, difficulty learning new information. But most critically, it can damage that frontal lobe, the piece of the brain that is not fully developed until the mid-20s. That key piece of the brain really needs to be protected. I like that was what was said earlier about as parents, we're kind of that frontal lobe part of the brain, because it's true. That's the braking system, and that's the part of the brain most significantly impacted and first impacted when alcohol is put into the body. And more specifically about how the teenage brain works with this overall, we are aware that the teenage brain is incredibly capable of learning. It's creating rapid connections over time. I always tell students they're having more fun than we are as adults, and it's true because they have higher levels of pleasure chemicals. They're more easily stimulated, and that stimulation can also happen when we introduce alcohol or other drugs. They are also primed for risk-taking and hardwired for pleasure. So if something feels good, they immediately want to do it again. And if you have a teenager or a child in your life and you've ever tried to, say, put a limit on tech use, said, okay, you can only be on TikTok for half an hour, or you can only play this video game for half an hour. And then you get them saying like, oh, but mom, oh, but dad, 5 more minutes. They're pushing against that boundary. Because their brain is craving more of that reward. The same thing is happening as well when it comes to alcohol, but alcohol is going to damage their brain in a much more significant way. So what are some of those specific risk factors? Curiosity is one of those, and really coming back to what was shared at the beginning about alcohol messaging, it can be really important to have these conversations. What I like to recommend is really like if you're watching a TV show together and there's a teenager drinking, just hit pause and say, what do you think about that? You don't have to turn it into a lecture, but instead you're just opening the door. What do you think about that? How are they selling that? There is some research that strongly shows a correlation between media literacy, being able to tell how is this being sold to me, and someone's ability to make a healthier choice or healthier decision. We also have heard the term peer pressure over and over and over again, but I really encourage everyone to think too in terms of that internal pressure, that idea of, I feel like everyone else is doing this. And so helping young people understand, is everyone actually doing that? Those perceived norms among peers. Mental health can also play a role. So I've found it really important to have conversations, especially if you have a child in your life who is struggling with their mental health, to have those conversations and directly say, especially if they're on medication, this could worsen symptoms. Specifically when it comes to nicotine and marijuana use, there is a correlation too with alcohol use. But those drugs in particular is a strong correlation between teenage depression and using those substances. When it comes specifically to alcohol, alcohol can worsen symptoms. And if someone is already taking a medication, it is preventing that medication from functioning appropriately. Unhealthy role modeling, and this could be not just in the home, but really what they're seeing around them. And so just like Kim said at the beginning, really modeling and thinking about what you are showing your child. It is a difficult time right now as the pandemic continues. There's a lot going on in the world. And so role modeling, not just how you function with alcohol and other drugs, but also how you handle and deal with stress can be really helpful. What I have up here too is minority stress. What I mean by minority stress is when an individual, this could be related to race, ethnicity, gender expression, being a member of the LGBTQ community. If an individual does not have a trusted adult in their life and they're feeling a lot of that stress, if they're feeling that outsider and they don't feel connected, that can be an area to help support that child so that they're not going to move on and use other substances. Really, a lot of it comes down to creating supports for students. And the last piece, misinformation about risk. The more we can emphasize all use equals risk, it doesn't matter what the substance is, doesn't matter if it's a legal substance, the more we can protect young people. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to whoever is after me.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. That was very helpful. Great information. Just a reminder, folks, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat for us. Liz Snodgrass is with us from Family Services. Liz, do you want to talk about some of your programs?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Montgomery County Office of Drug and Alcohol is really committed to decreasing the numbers of substance use among our youth. And it's really through different community education programs, parent and guardian education programs, and then also youth education program. Some of the things, Stacy, that we do are some social norms campaigns with some kids throughout some of our school districts. So I just wanted to encourage attendees to check out the county's Health and Human Services page, Family Services page. A lot of times we're advertising some programs that we're doing. Also looking for youth to participate in some of the programs to educate their peers on the information that they learn and to learn about the data and what the numbers actually are and to understand that not everybody's using. And then, we also have that parent piece to teach parents some messaging to give to their kids about substance use and try and be a little bit more clear, because I know it's hard. It's hard, I was looking at some of the 2021 PACE data today, and I believe that one of the things that showed was, I think it was the upper 40%, kids were saying that they saw a parent that was drunk recently. So, we can say all of these messages that we don't agree with it. It's not okay in our home, but then, it's the confusing message. So a lot of our programming is around giving those messaging and ways to talk to our kids. So please join us. Yeah, along with all of these amazing Be Part of the Conversation programs that Kim and Judy give.
Thank you, Liz. I think it is really important to talk about social norms just because I think that alcohol has just got to be the trickiest one. I mean, even vaping now, at least there's been enough messaging around it that certainly we still want to see a big decline in vaping, but it just came on so quickly. Cigarettes, beautiful job, as somebody said earlier, like we did a beautiful job of like getting that tamped down, and kids were not smoking those combustible tobacco cigarettes. Boy, my generation thought that those were cool. How cool are these vape things? And that just really annihilated, so much good work that was done in prevention up until that point. But at least, again, messaging is getting out that, especially now with COVID, we certainly don't want to be compromising our lungs by putting anything in them other than clean, fresh air as much as we can. But alcohol still is the number one substance that is misused or used by young people. When we're looking at that K through 12 population, under 18 population, but also, and I know that Stacy and her colleague Katie really do a lot of work with college students. And Stacy, I wonder if you could even touch on like what the trajectory is from high school alcohol use, kind of putting you on the spot here, I'm sorry, but alcohol use in high school and then toward those, not just in college, but college age, that 18 to 25, even 18 to 21, 21 being when it is legal to consume alcohol. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I absolutely can. What I find really interesting, and I actually did mean to mention this too, so I'm going to like do a roundabout answer to that question. When we look at data from grades like 8, 10, 12, and then college age, which is what the National Survey Monitoring the Future tends to look at, and I can admit myself, when I entered this field, I would have thought, okay, as students get closer to graduating, they're probably drinking more. But the fact is, we actually tend to see the largest jump in use between grade 8 and 10. And what that means is if a child is going to make that unhealthy choice to pick up a substance, in most cases alcohol, it happens in that grade 8 to 10 year. And that's really where it starts to set that pattern. We have looked at what college age use looks like. College use throughout the pandemic was actually significantly lower. So historically speaking, college age adults who were in college tended to have higher rates of binge drinking than college age adults who were not enrolled in college or living at home. That actually flipped during the pandemic. And so this kind of goes back to that idea that a couple of us were touching on tonight, that it's not protective for a young person to drink. Those stories that we hear in the news about someone getting into a fatal accident or getting kicked out of college or these other major consequences, a lot of that use patterning was started in high school and those early high school years. So the longer we can really just delay that use of a substance, the lower their risk. Those students who are in college, who are binge drinking to really unhealthy degrees, a lot of that does start with that misinformation in that grade 8 to 10 or grade 10, 8 to 10 piece there.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Thanks for the question. I see regarding emphasizing risks. How can a parent get a teen to understand the risks? Mine firmly believes I'll never get caught. The police in town don't care if teens drink, etc. I'm going to guess that Kelly Lloyd would disagree with that, with that young person's perception. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yes, I would. They do care about it because it can, if they can nip it in the bud with the underage drinking, then they have fewer problems further on down the line as far as DUIs go, crashes, anything more serious than that. So I would say that perception is wrong, while, of course, on the priority of things, obviously, they're investigating people with weapons or assaults and things of that nature. That's going to be a primary focus for them. But in the grand scheme of things, you have to also care about these quality of life crimes because they can escalate into larger things that the community really cares about. And that's where you can make a huge impact. So I would disagree with your teen's perception of it. But and this is more of a question for the others because I don't have any teen kids yet. I'm getting there, but I don't have them yet. But as far as opening up that dialogue with them so that they can understand, you don't want to do the scared straight tactic of, well, you could get out there and wreck into somebody and kill them. Like, that's not the strategy that's effective in my experience when talking with teens. But some of the other moms on here could probably address that more clearly.
Yeah, and I would love to hear from the others too, and I'd love to hear Heather's perspective as well as somebody who, I'm going to put a pin in that for a second and just say, the question says, how can a parent get a teen to understand the risks? I don't know if we can. I don't know if we can really convince a child that, they feel it. We felt it. Come on, we were all kids. We felt invincible. I would never do this. I would never drive and hurt somebody. And I tell this story a lot about those scare tactics that we've all talked about, because there is so much research that says that is not effective. My son, when he was in high school, and at that time, I had no idea he was already using substances, to cope with whatever he was coping with. So he came home one day, we were sitting at the dinner table, and he was telling us in great detail about an assembly they had that day. With the presenter was he was a young man, and he was showing slides one after another of kids who had been killed by drunk drivers, one after another, one after another. And he said, this one is my brother, and I was the drunk driver who's responsible for his death. And of course, everybody was like emotional, and it was horrifying. And he's telling us this with great emotion, like how, and he described being in the medevac, and he could look down and see his brother's crumpled body on the ground. And I'm remembering it vividly, and it was my son's assembly. That's how much he was relating it to us. 2-3 years later, my son was driving under the influence. It did not stop him because he didn't make the connection to his personal experience in life and what I would never do that. It's so to help kids understand the risks might even be, it's certainly important to at least plant some seeds. But the bigger question is, why do you think you need to alter your mood? This is what alcohol is for. It's for altering your mood. It is for, kind of giving yourself either a feel good or a feel less or something to feel different. Can we talk about why you want to feel differently? Would you talk to someone who can help you about why you want to feel differently? Because parents, we cannot have all the answers to this. Just because someone has a child and becomes a parent does not mean we have the answers to all of this. We need to turn to people. There are so many terrific resources in school districts. There are student assistance programs, school guidance counselors. Student assistance programs, by the way, I think so many folks don't know about those. They are mandated in public schools throughout Pennsylvania. They are there as a team to work with students who are referred to them for a variety of challenges. They might even run groups on things like grief or suicidal ideation or self-harm or substance use or isolate, whatever. So they're a great resource. If it's possible to see a private therapist, there are many terrific ones who we can refer to as well, who work with adolescents and young adults who are just tremendous. But please, parents, don't feel like you have to have all the answers. And those lectures, remember Charlie Brown's mother, that's kind of where those lectures tend to go, unfortunately, into our kids' heads. So I don't know. I would love to hear other people's thoughts about this, though. Such a good question.
Kim, I obviously don't have the answers, but I feel like I might have some insight because I know a lot of my personal problems came from not understanding what alcohol was or what alcoholism was, and what it really meant to do something bad under the influence. Alcoholism is genetic and runs in my family. But I didn't understand what alcoholism was. I was told that a lot, but I didn't know what it was. And I think it would have been helpful if I understood it a little bit better, and I understood the dangers of it. And the same goes for pain medication. I also had for anything. I didn't know you could be physically dependent on anything. So I think that's just education and awareness. And also, I think what you guys do at Be a Part of the Conversation, when you go to the schools and talk to kids open and honestly about it, I think that's a big part of, helping to prevent.
Yeah. But just a note of clarification: we don't actually talk to the kids ourselves in our program. We're typically, sometimes we'll have somebody come in and do a workshop with kids, but for the most part, and actually, Heather, you did that one of those rare times.
I did speak to.
You did speak to kids. You were not dreaming it. You did speak to kids. But that is unusual for us. We like to think of ourselves as providing support to the scaffolding around the child, right? So the parents, the educators, the community at large, and so forth. But no, it's a really great point. And just to help parents too, to understand that if we demonize this, that can be kind of problematic too, right? So we have to find sort of that sweet spot of having open, meaningful conversations, but not going to, and also, and I usually share this too, is, when we see somebody intoxicated, when we see somebody who's clearly drinking alcoholically, please, please, please be thoughtful about the language you're using. If it's very derogatory, if it's train wreck and all that kind of, language, our kids are not going to talk to us about their drinking or anyone else's drinking, because now we know how you feel about that, right? So we want to use supportive language. And if there is, as Heather said, absolutely, genetics is such an important piece of this. If we have a history in our family of hypertension, of diabetes, things like that, we would hopefully also share that information with our kids to say, we're at risk for this. So we're going to need to watch diet and exercise or whatever that might be. And we can start talking to our kids from such a young age about making, I also love the idea of, when we talked a lot about modeling, not just by the omission of modeling drinking, but also the positive modeling of, I am so stressed out, I'm going to go take a walk. I need some fresh air. Do you want to come take a walk with me? Modeling that, saying this is how we adults deal with stress. I found this great meditation app. Do you want me to tell you about it? So there's so many things that we can do when we have these opportunities with that still developing brain to build really healthy connections so that there are alternatives to drinking. If, as the parent who asked the question about, these conversations that they're having with their child, I think trying to bring in someone else who can talk with them about, why is it that you're still going back to this? We have an uphill battle the way this is perceived in our culture. We really do. So, God, I'm just so grateful that you guys are all helping us with this. And Stacey, did you have anything you wanted to add about the piece with talking with your children?
Yeah, I just wanted to just briefly add, and we clearly the scare tactics don't work. We probably remember that from our childhood. Whatever era we grew up in, it was used. So instead, I like to use this idea of early intervention. So I'm kind of taking those consequences closer. So a child is absolutely not going to be like, I'm not going to end up in a car accident, but I'm asking them, like, so what things have you seen? Like, have you ever seen anyone vomit in front of you? Did you actually know that's like a sign of alcohol overdose? Like, let's talk about what that means. And so kind of bringing those consequences a little bit closer, possibly even asking a child, so like, what is alcohol doing for you? What are these other drugs doing for you? What would be some of the benefits of maybe even cutting back on that use? Does that feel scary? Why or why not? And then kind of go into that conversation of like, maybe we should talk to someone about this. But again, kind of getting those consequences a little bit closer. When I meet with students, I'm not talking about those far away consequences. Some kids I meet they've never driven a car. So like, even like talking about like being in a car, but how can it impact my relationship with my family? The number one question I get when I share my experience with students, I tell students very often I'm in recovery, they say, what did your mom and dad think? No matter what the age is, no matter where I am, because they care. And so kind of taking that focus more so on, how's this impacting your relationships? How's this impacting not just like those long-term, it could lead to liver damage, stuff like that. A kid's not thinking about their long-term liver damage. They're thinking though of, this interfered with my friendship. I yelled at my friend and I didn't mean to, or what are those like kind of smaller pieces?
Right. I like that you shared that about how important it was to the kids, that what the parents think, because we learned that too from one of our, and now again, I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth here. We had another time that we had a clinician come in and talk to some high school students, and he was asking them, Judy, do you remember how Patrick put it? It was Patrick Dowling. And I think he asked them like, what, like to like shout out their priorities and like, what is most important influences in your life? Was that how he posed the question?
Yeah, I think that was it. Mm-hmm.
And number one was family or parents, or, it was like, that was their number one. And I think probably parents of high school kids would be very surprised to know that they really are important. Their attitudes, their experiences, their words are really important. They're also having this, because of adolescent development, they're flexing their grown-up muscles and trying to transition into adulthood. That's all of their growth is about it. You know, their body is telling them you need to fly out of this nest pretty soon. So there's probably going to be a lot of like trying to show their adultness, you know, and I don't need you and I can't wait to get out of here and all that kind of stuff. That's very natural. That's the natural part of development, of adolescent development. But they still absolutely see parents as vital to their safety and their knowledge and their understanding of the world. I love that quote. I can't remember. I don't have any idea who said it, but it's amazing how much smarter my dad got the older I got, you know, like the wisdom of your parents. You don't see it. You don't know it's really there until you recognize it later in your life.
Oh, we also know that parents are the number one influencer on their kids and decisions, and more than school, friends, but parents are really important. So I think we have a great question, and it's been posed to me a lot of times when I've talked about this stuff. And maybe Stacy, gonna put you on the spot. Maybe you have a good answer for this, but the parent asked that my son would say he drinks at parties to have fun. Okay, that was his motivation. Beer pong. They seem to think alcohol is the only way to have fun and necessary for parties. And I never know what to say to that. And if our kids are just, you know, they're doing experimenting, they're doing a little more than experimenting, but they're saying that the only reason I'm drinking is because it's fun. What do we say to that?
Yeah, and I would also pose that question. So what is fun about it? Why is this more fun? Why is this taking up your time in this way? And also just reiterating something that's been said multiple times tonight, that you are the parent. Like you're not their friend. Like you can say stuff and push back and say, I don't care if it's fun. I don't see this as healthy. And really setting those strong, firm boundaries can also be helpful. Other pieces that I've heard from parents over the years too is giving students alternative methods of having fun. So like you all in a dark basement together playing beer pong, like let's give you something a little more exciting to do. Like, so can I provide an alternative activity for them? Is there some other stuff that you like to do? Really digging into like, what is fun about it? Is it that you're in a large group? Great, awesome. Let's go play laser tag. Let's go do something more active. And so like offering those alternatives. But also, again, just setting that firm boundary. I am your parent or I am your caregiver, and this is not okay. So you're not going to go over to this house. We're sometimes afraid to set up that boundary because we don't want our child to be upset with us or the people we take care of. But it really is true that you are the frontal lobe. You are that braking system in their brain. You are setting those rules and regulations, and it's perfectly acceptable to have those.
Great point.
I think it's fair too to say, like, you know, I get it. You know, when he says to his parent, you know, like this is all fun. Well, in his mind, it is fun. They're laughing. Their inhibitions are down. You know, I mean, we know that alcohol definitely has that effect, right? It lowers your inhibitions, and so it feels, of course, it feels fun. So to say like, how do you refute that? Like she said, I don't even know what to say to that, of course, because it's hard to refute that, but it doesn't matter. There might be loads of other things that are also illegal that are not okay to do. You know, we can't accept it. It's not okay to do. And you're going to have to find other things that are fun. I am wide open to hearing what your ideas are. This can't be the only idea. It is not okay. You know, it's really tough. Oh, there's another question. I don't think so.
Can I just add a follow-up point to that? Because it just reminded me in meetings I've had with parents and caregivers before, a question kind of related to that sometimes we're afraid to say is, what if my child asks, hey, did you ever drink in high school? Should I share that information or not? And that is up to the individual, like how that works in your family dynamics. But if you choose to share that information that in high school or illegally you've used alcohol or other drugs, consider couching it in health terms. So saying, I did not have as much information as you did, so I made the unhealthy choice to drink. This, and this did happen to me. This could have happened to me. Or even bringing in some of those situations, not using it as in a scare tactic way of, I saw this person, face these major consequences, but instead saying, I got into this situation, I lied to my parents about it, and I felt really, really bad. Sharing a situation like that can be really helpful. And then rounding off that conversation by saying, you have more information than I did, so I expect you to make different, healthier choices. And just adding that in case that's a question in anyone's mind that they just don't want to ask.
I love that. Thank you. That's a great point. I don't see any other new questions. Any final thoughts from any of our panelists and presenters?
Kim, let me say one more thing, kind of on that last topic. First of all, it took me a long time to realize you can have just the same amount of fun sober than you can drunk. But also, I should have mentioned this when I spoke, one of the reasons I was so drawn to drugs and alcohol was because it helped me to have more fun because of my high social anxiety, just like my high anxiety. So I do think that if they really are having a hard time in groups of people, maybe that's something worth looking further into.
Great point. That's a really great point. We had a speaker years ago who was talking, and he's like an executive at a rehab center now. Like he's been in the field of addiction treatment for many, many years. And he talks about, I love this description. It was so visual. So I just could totally picture him. He said, imagine a 13-year-old, all elbows and braces, going to his first dance. He said, I was shy. I didn't talk to girls. I was not cool. I walk into this dance and a couple of the cool guys offered me a drink. He's like, what wasn't to love? Like, I'm talking to girls, I'm dancing, I'm with the cool kids. He was just primed for it, and he just went right down the rabbit hole, So it's really not surprising. And especially with the, just all the not even peer pressure, but peer presence, that we're learning more and more about that, how it's just the fact that it's around. I mean, imagine also the kid who has a set of friends who they've grown up with, and now they're entering those years of where some experimentation is starting, and some of their friends choose to start drinking. Are they going to get a whole new set of friends, or are they going to just stay with those friends and not drink? I mean, it's really not surprising that kids are challenged by this. But I think, again, it's so important to remind them the majority of kids do not drink alcohol. The majority do not. It feels like it's everywhere. If your kids are telling you everybody does it, it is just, and that is incorrect, So I think that's such an important thing to share. I get so frustrated with even some of my most favorite pop culture people are just out there just glorifying alcohol use and cannabis, by the way, which also makes me, it's a whole nother conversation. But, we can, again, be that messenger that says this is not critical to your social life. This is not, there are other ways to deal with anxiety. And you can absolutely have so much more fun without substances. And I'll share one quick story. My son, as I mentioned, is in recovery. One of his favorite things to do in his addiction was go to club. He loves to dance. So he would go to clubs that play like house music and that kind of stuff. And there's a whole drug culture around that. But now in his sobriety, which is he's been in for many, many years, he and his fiance go to clubs just like that once in a while, and substance free, and he is having the time of his life. And he's actually frequently asked by people, what are you using? Because they are and really want to know what he's on so that they can have it. And it's just kind of hilarious that he's not on any substance and he's just enjoying himself. And oh, by the way, he remembers the entire night, so you can absolutely 100% have fun and not be in a game room playing pong, beer pong and that kind of stuff. There's a whole world of things to do outside of substance use. So any last thoughts from anyone?
I just want to thank you all for being here and thank any parents and caregivers like listening to, and just reemphasizing that everyone here is a protective factor in the life of a child that you might not even be aware of. You might be the trusted adult for your friends, your child's friend, the friend's mom. You could be that person. So the more knowledge you have, the more powerful that can be.
Very well said. Perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to remind you all to take the survey when this ends. So please take a moment to complete that for us. Thank you. Thank you all so very much. You were a terrific panel. I really appreciate it. The recording of this program should be available by tomorrow morning, Friday morning. It will be on that website, conversation.zone/alcohol. So check it out there, share it with your friends. Thank you again, everybody, for being here, attendees and panelists, and have a wonderful evening.
All right, thank you.
Good night. Thanks.